This is an election night update from WCIA3 News, your local election headquarters.
This point, we're past election night. It's 12
Wednesday now.
It is Wednesday, and Paul, you have been in studio, it feels like, for hours, just following all the different county results. The most important right now being Champaign County. So can you kind of give us a recap of where things stand for anyone who missed our latest update at 11:54?
Yeah, so about a little over 10 minutes ago, we talked with Courtney Bunting, who's been at the Brookins Center, talking with the clerk's office, and the issues there go back a few weeks, obviously, because Aaron Ammons, the county clerk, his office has had myriad issues throughout the early voting, an incorrect address on mail-in ballots. His office sent the wrong address of a polling location to some voters. His office was sued by the Republican Party in Champaign County. So there's been no shortage of issues just leading up to Election Day. And then just on election night, since the polls closed, his office has been very slow to release results. But at the same time, you could say that maybe that's a good thing, that they're being cautious. But at the end of the day, people want those results. It didn't stop Congressman Davis from declaring victory. He obviously had a large vote margin. If you caught Mark Maxwell's portion of the cut-in just before Congressman Davis spoke, he pointed out that Betsy Dirksen-Londrigan had about a 20,000 or so vote advantage in 2016. She would have needed to make up more than double that in the vote here. And we talked about in Champaign County specifically, college students would have needed to vote in mass, and we know that there aren't quite as many college students on the U of I campus this year as there have been in the past because of the pandemic.
Right, and speaking of the pandemic, we know from talking with Lindsay throughout the night, Lindsay Jones, our reporter, that the pandemic has had an impact, and we want to go to her one more time tonight just to talk about how it has affected some of the different state totals, how COVID will play into this, and what's coming up. I'd say tomorrow, but at this point, what's happening today?
It is tomorrow already. So we can definitely say that COVID-19 had an impact on just the increase in vote by mail ballots that we saw before today, coming into today. In Illinois, this is the last day that you can have your vote by mail ballot postmarked for it to count. Something to keep in mind with that, legally, Illinois has 14 calendar days from today, from November 3rd, actually, so yesterday, as of a few minutes ago, to continue to count those vote by mail ballots. So when we're talking about precincts being in and counted tonight, we're talking about in-person voting. We're going to get mail-in ballot totals as they come in the next several days. And those totals could impact various local elections, as well as some other state elections. So there's just something to keep in mind there as we go forward throughout the week. And then getting back to the COVID-19 pandemic, not only did it increase the amount of mail-in ballots that were sent out by the State Board of Elections, some people today were actually unable to vote because of COVID-19. They were recently contagious. They were recently diagnosed, potentially, and like I said, today was the last day to have a mail-in ballot postmarked. So some people, just due to their recent diagnosis, weren't able to get that vote in. I got that information from the senior counsel for the Chicago branch of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. So they had a team of 300 people that were ready to help Illinoisans and some people in Indiana as well, to help voters if they had any issues ranging from, voter intimidation to access restrictions, that kind of thing. They did have a record increase this year in calls for help, but most of those issues were able to be resolved. And the ones that weren't were largely COVID-19 related. So something going forward. It would be nice to, they didn't have it yet. I don't know if they will or when they'll have that information, but it would be nice going forward to see, how many people were at the last minute affected by COVID-19 and voting. But definitely an unusual year for sure.
Lindsay, thank you so much for all of your work tonight, and we will be getting those updates from you, I'm sure, throughout the rest of the week, but for now, we will let you go to bed. Have a good rest of the morning. But Paul, one of the things before we get over to looking at some of the national results, I do want to pull up our station website for a moment so we could talk a bit about some of these local election results right now. So
yeah, a lot of those races, obviously, people, particularly in Champaign County, as we alluded to just a few minutes ago, haven't seen final results because those results haven't been available, particularly in Champaign County and the other races that have been affected by those results because they've been slow to come in. But we just need to remind people that, we do have updates of all the races. We've been collecting those results from election commissions across central Illinois. We have those results on our website. Obviously, the biggest races on the ballot, that graduated tax failed. Dick Durbin is going back to the Senate. Rodney Davis is going back to the House. Adam Kinzinger is going back to the House. Darren LaHood is going back to the House. Mary Miller was elected to Congress.
which will likely be the last time anyone's in that seat.
Based
on districting.
So redistricting, that's going to be very big. And, we don't have a broad picture of, the statewide look at the Illinois State House. We do know that Republicans fared very well in central Illinois based on the results that, we looked at tonight. Certainly not unexpected. If you want to really get a good look at how it's going to be, Democrats, had a supermajority in both the House and Senate in Illinois coming into tonight. And of course, if that, supermajority is maintained, they, along with Governor Pritzker, will be drawing the maps that will be used for the next 10 years. And that will be something, obviously, to keep an eye on, as you mentioned, because those congressional seats, those 16 congressional seats, or 18 congressional seats in Illinois, will be going down to 17, and that's a big deal. That's why filling out the census was so important, throughout these last few months into the end of October.
Right, and we talk about this supermajority in the state house, and of course, this is all, well, there's still the cloud of this federal corruption investigation going on with House Speaker Madigan related to ComEd, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with the House as we move forward.
Yeah, certainly there's been some division among some of the Democratic membership, but not enough to certainly sway Speaker Madigan from his position. In a couple weeks or a little over a week or so, they'll return for veto session. We might get a little bit of an indication of what's going to happen at that point, but we're still in the early stages there, and then obviously we're months away from any sort of redistricting fights that are going to take place.
Right, and before we get to that fight months away, we've got to focus on what's coming up in the next hour, or the next couple of days, weeks. Let's take a look at this map right now for President Trump running against challenger former Vice President Joe Biden. Now, of course, we have talked about how one of the biggest battleground states that we will be following is Michigan. And Paul, even though you've made Central Illinois your home, you are a Michigander, so let's talk about those numbers. I feel like you are the expert to have on this right now.
Yeah, so there are really 4 states. I mean, if you look at the map that we have on our website right now, we're getting numbers from the Associated Press, but there are really 4 outstanding states right now that people should really focus on. And those are, as you point out, Michigan, but also Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Georgia, while it was leaning very heavily toward Trump in the early going, as more ballots are being counted, particularly in Fulton County where Atlanta is, that gap is narrowing, and I've seen some discussion on social media from reporters who are in contact with the presidential campaigns. They think that gap is narrowing. If people heard earlier with Vice President Biden speaking on our air, he was saying his campaign was a little surprised about how close that race was. Ultimately, it's probably going to come down to Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Those are the three states that are ultimately going to determine who wins the White House. The vote counting in Detroit, as you pointed out, in Michigan, that's going to be big. Madison, Milwaukee in Wisconsin, and then, of course, Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. We've heard about some of the issues that have been taking place there.
And we know that Wisconsin has been such a huge focus. When I was working in Wisconsin for the 2016 presidential election, one of the big topics that came out of the election day was the fact that during the general election season, Hillary Clinton hadn't visited Wisconsin. And this time, not only have we seen what was originally intended to be a full DNC during the summer, had the pandemic not impacted that, we also had Biden, we had Trump, we had Pence, we had Harris, everyone just visiting our neighbors up north repeatedly over the last couple of months, especially in the last couple of weeks. And it just shows that the Midwest is somewhere that they are all really focused on.
Yeah, this was certainly these states. You saw that the Biden campaign held on to Minnesota. It's been a reliably blue state for Democrats in, I can't recall how many elections now, but that was important for Democrats to hold on to. They needed that as part of their so-called blue wall. And Biden's return to this presidential race was going to be a test to see if they could restore that so-called blue wall. But that would need to include Wisconsin and Michigan, at least one of those states in this electoral college vote, for Biden to win. Biden can win the White House with one of those states and lose Pennsylvania, or with those states and lose Pennsylvania. If he loses those states, President Trump has another 4 years in office for sure.
And we will be continuing to follow this, as will reporters all across the country. This is not something that, as we know, it's 12/18 on Wednesday. This isn't something that is getting resolved on Election Day. And of course, it never would have been. This is something that the final results always, still have to be tabulated. But
and this year we've talked about it, is more unusual than any year that we've experienced, certainly in large part because of the pandemic and because the way voting has changed, just in general. More states have become more progressive in the way that they have changed voting, just with no reason absentee balloting. That has become more common in more states. More people were taking advantage of absentee balloting because of concerns about going to the ballot box. But even with the 100 million people across the country voting early, you still saw lines across the country today, long lines going out the door. So there were still tens of millions of votes to be counted across the country today. There was always talk about record-breaking voter totals, and I think it was 66% of America's population being a record vote total, and I think that was back Kennedy-Nixon era. So it's been a long time since we've seen that type of voter participation. But, when you think of the big picture, 66% is still very low when you're looking at voter participation, even in countries that don't mandate voting.
I believe 1876 was around 80% voter turnout. So that is the record that,
In the modern era, yeah.
Yeah, but, it's, I think AP had 1876. So let's see if we can, in the modern era, hit that too. But, it is interesting seeing those numbers.
Yeah, obviously a lot of people were afraid to go to the polls for various reasons. In the last week in Illinois, for 7 days in a row, we've had over 6,000 COVID cases a day. There are more than 3,000 people as of, I don't want to say last night, but probably as of last night, still over 3,000 people in the hospital with COVID. So we've seen the state's numbers. Every region in the state is impacted by COVID. Every region in the state is under COVID mitigation.
Right, starting, well, 20 minutes ago.
Yeah,
Region 11 was the last.
Illinois is not alone
Correct.
as far as the COVID surge. Michigan, which is a much smaller state by population, had almost as many COVID positive cases on Monday as Illinois did. But the population disparity is huge.
And that's definitely something that we are going to have to continue monitoring as well over the next several days. From the elections to the COVID numbers, Region 2, I meant to say, was the final one that began mitigation efforts at midnight. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack today. There's going to be so much to follow in the days to come.
Yeah, and the biggest thing going forward is that, these votes wouldn't otherwise be certified for another couple weeks anyway. So, in Illinois, you can have your ballot postmarked by election night, Tuesday, and it has to be received within the next couple weeks. And so as long as you fall within that guideline, your ballot's going to be counted. Illinois is not a state where the result is going to be in question about which way Illinois swings because of the large Democratic population in Cook County. But there are other states where, if the vote is closer, absentee ballots may play a bigger role. And this is not a new phenomenon.
No. And, we'll be wrapping up here within the next minute or so, but for anyone that has stayed up till about 12:30 for this and wants to wake up bright and early, we are going to be following the latest updates with Christy and Max starting at 5 a.m. So thank you so much, Paul, for being the last one standing out here with me.
Sure.
Thank you to Kevin Leidy, who has been working behind the scenes to help keep all of you updated. But for everyone, we will continue to bring you the latest updates on all of our platforms. Thank you so much for watching us tonight on your local election headquarters, and we look forward to giving you the latest updates as they come in. Have a good night, everyone.
This is an election night update from WCIA 3 News, your local election headquarters.